It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind where people rush out of their homes juggling coffee cups, briefcases, and half-finished breakfasts. But for 43-year-old Mariah Jennings, it was anything but ordinary. She had just left her Washington, D.C. townhouse, heels clicking against the pavement as the early sun shimmered across her tailored navy suit. She was on her way to a classified briefing, one that could shift the future of Homeland policy. No one would suspect that just hours later, she'd be sitting in the back of a police cruiser, handcuffed, accused of crimes she didn't commit. Mariah looked like any other professional woman in the city, sharp, confident, reserved. But behind her calm demeanor was a force few ever got to see. As the head of Homeland policy, she'd sat across presidents, debated national threats, and navigated the country's most sensitive issues. Yet today, she'd be fighting something far more personal and far more sinister. The day had started off on a hopeful note. Mariah had kissed her daughter goodbye and waved at the neighbors. She'd even stopped at her favorite coffee shop, where the barista, a young black teen named Elijah, always greeted her with a smile and an extra shot of espresso. "Big meeting today?" he had asked, sliding her drink across the counter. She nodded, grateful for the routine, for the stability. But as she stepped out into the street, everything changed. A loud screech echoed behind her. 2 police cruisers cornered her at the curb. Within seconds, officers rushed toward her. "Put your hands where I can see them," one yelled, weapon drawn, voice sharp and commanding. Passers-by stopped, phones in hand, stunned by the aggression. Toward the well-dressed woman who had done nothing but order a latte, Mariah froze, trying to keep her voice steady. "I think there's been a mistake. Shut it!" Another officer barked, grabbing her arm, twisting it behind her. "Back." She gasped in pain but said nothing more. Years in federal service had trained her to stay calm under pressure. But nothing, no war room, no high-level meeting, could have prepared her for this moment. The officers claimed she matched the description of a wanted suspect in an armed robbery that took place just an hour earlier, 5 miles away. The suspect? A black woman, average height, mid-40s, suspicious behavior. That was all they had, that was enough. They didn't ask for ID. They didn't give her a chance to speak. They cuffed her, shoved her into the back of a police vehicle, and drove off as the crowd whispered, phones still filming. At the station, things got worse. The lead officer, Sergeant Kyle Bennett, didn't bother with pleasantries. "So, you thought you'd get away with it, huh?" he sneered, leaning in close. "You people always think you're smarter than the system." Mariah looked him in the eyes, not flinching. "You have the wrong person." Bennett chuckled. "You all say that. No fingerprints, no evidence, no weapon. But they kept her in a cell for hours, with no phone call, no rights read. Her bag, her phone, her government ID, all confiscated and ignored. Meanwhile, across town, the real world kept spinning. Her absence at the policy briefing raised eyebrows, especially from Agent Jordan Hayes, her closest aide and a former Army intelligence officer. When she didn't respond to calls, emails, or messages, Jordan knew something was wrong. Mariah Jennings was many things, but flaky wasn't one of them. Back at the station, Mariah sat alone in a dim cell, the cold concrete beneath her a stark contrast to the polished floors of her office. She thought of her daughter, her team, the sensitive documents she hadn't been able to secure that morning. And still, the officers refused to listen. They mocked her background. They laughed when she said she worked for Homeland. One even said, "Oh, sure you do, and I'm the Pope." But what they didn't know would soon turn their world upside down. While Mariah was enduring injustice behind bars, something was brewing outside. A witness to the arrest, Elijah, the same teen who'd handed her that coffee, had posted a video online. The footage showed a woman in business attire being manhandled by police, despite showing no signs of resistance. The video went viral within an hour. Hashtags like "Justice for Mariah" and "A Black Woman Framed" began trending. Elijah had also noticed something strange. Mariah had dropped a Homeland Security badge as she was being arrested. He had picked it up, unsure of what to do. But the moment he saw the news, he decided to act. The note that he had originally written as a kind gesture thanking a woman he admired, would now be something more. It would be the start of a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. He took the badge to the local FBI office, nervous but determined. Inside, agents listened as he explained what happened. The moment they verified the ID, the mood shifted. Phones rang, screens lit up, faces turned pale. Back at the station, Sergeant Bennett was gloating to his partner. Easy collar, another. Thug off the street. His partner frowned. But something's weird, no priors, that badge she had looked real. Bennett shrugged. Fake. You know how they do it. Always pretending to be something they're not. Then the call came. An unmarked black SUV pulled up to the station. Out stepped 3 federal agents, one in full tactical gear. They showed their credentials, demanding immediate access to the detainee. Within seconds, the station erupted into controlled chaos. Officers scrambled. Bennett's smug face fell. Mariah, still locked in the holding cell, heard the commotion. She stood slowly, eyes narrowing as she recognized the voice of Jordan Hayes, shouting her name. "Mariah, we're getting you out!" The cell door flung open and Mariah stepped out, brushing dust from her jacket. Her face was calm, composed, but inside fire raged. Bennett stammered as the federal agents surrounded him. We thought she is the head of Homeland Policy," Agent Hayes interrupted, "and you just assaulted a federal officer, withheld her ID and violated a dozen protocols." The room went silent. Mariah stepped forward. Her voice was calm, steady, but cold. "You wanted a suspect. Now you have a scandal." But even as she was escorted out, her mind was racing. This wasn't over. Someone had planted false evidence. Someone had tipped off the cops to arrest her. Someone wanted her silenced. And whoever it was had connections. As she exited the precinct into the flashing lights of waiting cameras and media vans, Mariah knew the hardest part was just beginning. Because the frame-up wasn't just about race, it was about power, and someone very high up didn't want her asking questions. And across the city, a teenager who once just served coffee had unknowingly stepped into the biggest political firestorm of his life. All because of a simple gesture. A seat given on a crowded bus. A note handed in kindness. And now that note was about to change everything. The black SUV didn't slow down as it pulled away from the police station. Inside, Mariah sat in silence, staring out the window. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, but her mind was anything but calm. She had just been released from custody after being falsely accused, humiliated and treated like a criminal. Yet she knew that what happened to her wasn't a mistake. It was planned, too calculated, too convenient. Agent Jordan Hayes sat across from her, his jaw tight, his phone buzzing nonstop in his hand. "Someone set you up, Mariah," he said, finally breaking the silence. "They didn't just call in a false ID, they scrubbed you from the system. Your meeting today? It was reassigned without notice, your emails were blocked, access revoked. Someone inside is messing with your clearance." Mariah didn't respond at first. She looked down at the faint bruise on her wrist where the handcuffs had dug into her skin. "How far up do you think this goes?" she asked softly. Jordan hesitated. "Far enough that local cops knew not to question it. Far enough that whoever's behind it thought you'd go quietly, but they didn't expect the cameras or the kid." "Elijah," she murmured, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yeah, he's the one who handed your badge to the FBI. His video's got over 2 million views already. That act, him stepping forward, might have saved your life." Mariah's mind drifted back to that morning. Elijah, always polite, always quick with a smile, had offered her a seat once on a packed bus during a rainstorm, not knowing who she was, just seeing someone in need. That kindness had stuck with her. She'd written him a recommendation letter after finding out he was applying to a scholarship program. And just a few days ago, she'd given him a thank you note, something personal, encouraging, because he reminded her of her younger brother, lost too soon to the system. Now that same boy was tangled up in something he didn't understand. Back at the station, Sergeant Bennett was pacing the floor of his office. His face was pale and his hands shook slightly as he scrolled through his phone. The viral video had been picked up by major networks. People were already demanding answers. His superior had called, angry and panicked. Internal Affairs had launched a preliminary review. But what terrified Bennett most wasn't the heat from the public. It was the realization that he might have been used. He hadn't known who Mariah Jennings really was. He had followed an anonymous tip, logged in the system from a reliable, internal source. The suspect description had matched her roughly: black woman, blue suit, mid-40s, and the order to handle quickly and quietly had come from someone claiming federal coordination. Now he was starting to wonder if this whole thing had been a trap, for her and for him. In a dimly lit apartment in Northeast D.C., another figure watched the news unfold on an old television set. A woman in her late 50s, silver-streaked, hair wrapped in a scarf, sat with a newspaper on her lap and her phone set to silent. She knew Mariah. Years ago, they'd been allies, until Mariah moved deeper into federal service while she stayed on the fringe, working with whistleblowers and activists. She had warned Mariah once, told her that policy work came with invisible enemies, that the deeper you got, the more likely you'd get pulled under. And now, watching the headlines scroll across the screen, she whispered, "They're coming for you now." Meanwhile, in a boardroom miles away, men in suits sat around a polished table. None of them spoke. A digital screen at the far end displayed the headline, "Homeland official mistakenly arrested in police blunder. Racial bias or political setup." One man finally spoke. "We underestimated her, and now she's dangerous." Another nodded. "What about the boy?" "Just a kid. Won't be a problem." The first man narrowed his eyes. "Make sure of that." Quietly, Mariah had returned to her secure office by nightfall, though most of the staff had already left. Jordan stayed by her side as she reviewed the files that were still accessible. Redacted memos, missing attachments, emails showing unusual login attempts from unknown IP addresses. "They're scrubbing something," she said, frowning. "Deleting trails. Or covering their own," Jordan added. She clicked on a folder marked Operation Granite, one she hadn't touched in weeks. It opened, but half the contents were gone. The remaining files were filled with technical terms: foreign surveillance, encrypted devices, logistics chains. But one word kept appearing over and over. "Blackstone." Mariah leaned back. "Blackstone's a defense contractor. They've been lobbying to privatize sections of Homeland's infrastructure. If I'm not mistaken, I was due to speak against their proposal in next week's hearing." Jordan's eyes widened. That hearing was removed from the calendar, quietly. It clicked. The setup, the timing, the speed at which her credentials were blocked. It wasn't about race alone. It was about silencing her. And race was the tool they used to make it stick. Across the city, Elijah sat on his twin bed in his small bedroom, holding his phone tightly. The note Mariah had given him still rested on his desk. He hadn't read it yet. Not really. He'd been afraid to open it before. It felt like something private, too big for him. But now, after everything, he felt like he owed it to her. He unfolded the paper slowly. "Never let the world define your worth. You were born with purpose. Protect it." He read the words twice, then a third time, before blinking away tears. Outside his room, he could hear his mother speaking on the phone, his name coming up in nervous tones. Reporters had started calling. A neighbor said someone was watching their building. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the envelope Mariah had attached to the note. Inside was a scholarship application form, with a personal letter of recommendation signed by her, including her official title. He hadn't told anyone about that part yet. Back in her office, Mariah turned off the computer. "They're coming. After him," she said almost to herself. "He's a loose end." "We can protect him," Jordan replied. Mariah shook her head. "They'll try to discredit him first. Make him look like a liar or a criminal. That's the playbook. I've seen it too many times." Jordan looked at her. "Then what do we do?" Mariah stood, her voice steady. "We fight back, but not with noise, with truth. We find the source, we connect the dots, and we expose everything. Because if they can do this to me, if they can come for a boy who only did the right thing, then they've already gone too far. She turned to the window, watching the city lights flicker below. Somewhere out there, someone was working hard to keep her quiet. But what they didn't know was that Mariah Jennings had been through fire before, and every time she'd come out sharper. But as she stood in that quiet room, one thought kept echoing in her mind. This wasn't just an attack on her, it was a warning. And someone, somewhere, was already preparing the next move. Rain started to fall lightly over D.C., dotting the windows of Elijah's bedroom as he stared at his phone screen, unsure if he should post the rest of the footage. The clip that went viral had only shown the arrest, the shouting, the way Mariah was pushed into the squad car despite her calm demeanor. But what it didn't show was what happened before. How the officers had circled her for nearly 10 minutes, how one had quietly turned off his body camera, how another whispered something that made Elijah's stomach turn cold. He had filmed it all, just instinctively. Something about the moment had felt off. Now he wondered if releasing that part would protect Mariah, or put her in even more danger. Downstairs, his mother paced the living room floor. She was on edge. 2 strange cars had parked across the street that morning and hadn't moved all day. A man in a dark jacket had walked past their door 3 times without speaking. She'd grown up in neighborhoods where silence often carried warnings, and this silence felt heavy. "Elijah," she called softly, "turn off your phone for now, okay? Just don't answer any numbers you don't know." He nodded but didn't move. His mind kept going back to Mariah's words. Protect your purpose. It was a simple phrase, but now it felt like a mission. Still, he was just a kid, just one voice. Who would listen to him? Across the city, in a windowless room filled with monitors, a man in a gray suit reviewed footage of Elijah's viral video. He paused on the moment Mariah turned to the officer and calmly recited her rights. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't panicked. That made it worse for them. It made her look strong, like someone who knew the system inside out, which she did. The man made a note on a digital pad. "Find a way to discredit her," he said to the room. "We need something real or believable enough to plant. Financial inconsistencies, a conflict of interest, even a personal scandal. Whatever sticks." His assistant, a woman in her 30s with tight blonde curls and sharp eyes, nodded without looking up. "What about the kid? Monitor him. Don't touch him yet, but if he makes another move, we're ready." Back at the Department of Homeland Policy, Mariah walked through the dim corridors of the old building, her heels echoing quietly. Most of her team had gone home, but her assistant Priya was still at her desk, scanning a batch of documents with nervous energy. "Anything new?" Mariah asked. Priya looked up, eyes tired. "There's something weird. These memos about Blackstone and the city's data infrastructure. They're gone from the internal archive, but I found copies saved to a backup server." Mariah leaned in. "What do they say?" "Some sections were flagged for national risk exposure. But here's the thing. None of the flagged content has to do with foreign threats. It's about domestic surveillance, hidden contracts. They're planning to build data hubs under the name of emergency preparedness, but the data access language is wide open." Mariah frowned. "So they'd be able to monitor citywide traffic, communication signals, even facial recognition systems without oversight." "Exactly. And these officers, the ones who arrested you, 2 of them worked private detail for Blackstone before they joined the department." That made her pause. This wasn't just a rogue setup. It was strategic, a blend of public power and private motive. It was policy manipulation with real-world consequences, and it had nearly destroyed her reputation in a single morning. Meanwhile, Sergeant Bennett stood on the rooftop of the precinct, alone. The rain had soaked through his uniform, but he didn't seem to care. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. He hadn't told anyone yet, but a second file had landed in his inbox, this time about another target, a local journalist, anonymous source. Same formatting, same pressure to act fast. But something inside him had snapped after Mariah's arrest. He couldn't keep pretending. The woman hadn't even resisted, yet the force they'd used had been way over the top. He'd seen her badge after the fact, tucked into her blazer pocket. It had been right there the whole time. He inhaled deeply, then reached for his phone. In a quiet apartment in Baltimore, Layla Simmons, an independent reporter, was already one step ahead. She had watched Mariah's story unfold with growing unease. Layla had covered too many cases like this, black voices buried under false accusations, then quietly cleared when the public lost interest. But something about this one felt different. Mariah's background, her position, her silence since the arrest, it all hinted at something bigger. She had started pulling threads, anonymous emails, leaked files, interviews with former Homeland staffers. A pattern was forming, and every time she mentioned Blackstone, the conversation would suddenly go cold. She clicked on a hidden folder she'd named Echo. Inside were screenshots, audio recordings, metadata logs, all unverified but all troubling. One of them showed a proposed bill sponsored by lawmakers connected to Blackstone, with clauses allowing for police contracts to be fulfilled by federal-compliant private entities. Another clip was a phone call from an unnamed source. They framed her to send a message. She was the only one blocking Phase 3. Layla's pulse quickened. If Mariah was the barrier, then Phase 3 was the storm. That same night, Elijah couldn't sleep. He had opened the other envelope Mariah gave him. Inside was a flash drive, no label, no instructions, just a small note. Only open this if you truly need to understand. His hands trembled as he plugged it into his laptop. A folder appeared. Dozens of documents, security clearance reports, communication logs, audio clips. One video stood out, Mariah speaking at a private Homeland briefing. They don't just want control, she said in the clip. They want invisibility. They want to act without being seen. And the moment we allow private security to write our public policy, we've lost more than freedom. We've lost accountability. Elijah exhaled slowly. It was bigger than he thought, and he was in the middle of it now. Across the street, the black car that had been parked all day suddenly started. It pulled away slowly, headlights off. But what Elijah didn't see was the man across the alley, still watching, camera in hand, documenting every movement in silence. In the days ahead, threads would begin to intertwine. Mariah's investigation, Layla's reporting, Elijah's footage, Bennett's conscience, and all of it pointed in one direction. A plan years in the making, hiding behind policies and uniforms, funded by money that never saw the daylight. But the pieces weren't fitting together fast enough. Someone was still watching. Someone was still pulling strings. And the real question wasn't who framed Mariah Jennings, it was why now. And what were they rushing to cover up before someone like her could stop it for good? The days that followed felt like something out of a slow, burning nightmare. Every step Mariah took inside the Homeland building was shadowed by silence, by suspicion, by eyes that wouldn't meet hers. It was clear now. The message had been delivered. She was being watched, monitored, and maybe worse, slowly erased from the very system she once helped protect. Her keycard still worked, but some files had vanished from her terminal. Colleagues who used to greet her with warmth now barely looked up. There was fear in the air, thick, unspoken, and calculated. Across the city, Elijah sat on the rooftop of his building with his laptop open and the flash drive plugged in. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He had re-watched the clip of Mariah's speech nearly 10 times now. Each time something new struck him. The way she paused before naming the contractor. The quiet tension in her voice when she said, "We've already been compromised." He didn't fully understand the politics behind it all, but he knew corruption when he saw it. And more importantly, he knew what it felt like when truth was being smothered. Just 2 blocks from Elijah's building, Layla Simmons had begun preparing a story she wasn't even sure anyone would publish. She'd gone through all the usual channels, newsrooms, editors, even one of her old contacts at a local paper. Each time the same response came back. It's too risky. But the deeper she dug, the clearer the stakes became. This wasn't just about Mariah anymore. This was a blueprint, one that had been tested in other cities under different names. Every time a voice got too loud, every time someone questioned where the money was going or who had access to data collected from everyday people, something happened. A scandal, an arrest, a quiet removal. Late one night, Layla received a message from a private number. One line, "You're getting close. Stop now, or you'll regret it." She stared at the screen, hands frozen. Then, without hesitating, she sent the message and all her research to Mariah, encrypted and labeled simply "backup." Meanwhile, Mariah had begun to notice a strange pattern. A few files she couldn't access on her own computer appeared untouched when she used the public archive terminals in the policy department's library. Not only that, but logs of officer movements had been modified, edited to show they were never near the location of her arrest. It was a quiet rewriting of the narrative. But in one backup record, an older system that hadn't yet synced, the truth was still visible. GPS pings, badge IDs, unfiltered timestamps, proof that not only had they followed her, but they'd also waited until the traffic cameras in that neighborhood were briefly down for maintenance. She printed everything and walked to her car with her pulse racing. She didn't even make it. Halfway before she spotted a man leaning against the street lamp across from her parking spot. He wasn't moving, just watching. She turned around, walked straight back into the building, and called Bennett. The line was quiet for a long time. Then, his voice, "I've been expecting your call." Bennett didn't ask questions. He just gave her an address and told her to come alone. A safe house, off the grid. He had something to show her, something that could finally connect the pieces. At the same time, Elijah sat across from his mother at the kitchen table, showing her what he had uncovered. She listened quietly, her face tense with fear. She'd grown up during a time when people like Mariah weren't just silenced, they disappeared. But something about Elijah's determination made her sit straighter, braver. "You need to share this," she said softly, eyes wet but steady. "But do it smart, don't just post it, find someone who can protect the truth once it's out." He nodded, heart pounding. Back in the safe house, Mariah met Bennett in the dim light of a desk lamp. He looked older than she remembered, tired, haunted. On the table were 3 files, real ones, physical, untraceable. They contained logs of internal discussions between Blackstone executives and city officials, discussing testing compliance, procedures, and using Homeland's internal structure to fast-track policy control. "They've been doing this in phases," Bennett said, voice low. "Mariah, you were the last firewall. When you blocked their final clearance for phase 3, they shifted the game. You became the example." She stared at the documents. One page included a chilling note. "Neutralize influence before vote date. Discredit if necessary." Her hands shook. "They don't care about rules anymore," she whispered. "They're writing new ones." And yet, as the evidence piled up, so did the risks. That night, Bennett's phone buzzed with an alert. A breach in the station system. His files flagged. His access temporarily revoked. The house wasn't safe anymore. They left everything but the documents and disappeared into the city. That same night, Layla finally got a call from a source she thought had gone dark, an insider from Blackstone. "They're moving early," the woman said, panicked. "Phase 3 isn't next month, it's tomorrow. They're going to launch the surveillance grid in DC under the cover of emergency drills. If Mariah speaks, if that footage gets out, they lose everything. That's why they came after her." Layla hung up and started writing. The kind of story that could either open eyes or close doors forever. As dawn approached, Elijah stood near the Capitol steps holding a flash drive and a folded piece of paper. He wasn't alone. Around him, people had started to gather. Quietly, word had spread. Not through the news, but through whispers, texts, reposts, back channels. A new kind of network. Mariah was on her way there, too, with Bennett and the files. Layla's story was scheduled to drop within the hour. The pressure was rising, But so was the danger. From the edge of the crowd, a tall man in a suit adjusted his earpiece. He gave a subtle nod to someone across the street. They weren't going to let this moment happen easily, not if they could help it. And still, Elijah stood his ground. The same kid who gave up his seat on a crowded bus, who captured injustice when no one else thought to press record. Now, holding the final key to a truth buried under silence and fear, the flash drive in his hand felt heavier than ever. And somewhere deep in the layers of the Capitol's network, a system began to boot up. Surveillance protocols, new permissions. Phase 3. But what no one saw coming was who would speak first, and how everything would change in seconds. The air grew still, then movement in the distance, and just like that, the moment was here.